Welcome back to The Big Interview. It's a delight to have you. Hi, it's Graham. My guest today is Stuart Baxter, one of my favourite storytellers in football. I first got to know him after his team AIK Solna in Stockholm won the Swedish championship, and the antics of their hardline ultra Black Army fans got so out of hand, including one of them arriving in Stuart's office with a gun to demand better results, that when I interviewed him and wrote it up in the newspaper I was working for at the time, it kind of went a bit viral in the pre-viral days, to the extent that I ended up talking about it on BBC Radio 5 mid-morning with Nicky Campbell, because people just couldn't believe that AIK Solna's fans were as mental as indeed they were. Stuart was a guy to stay in touch with, and indeed by 2003, when the South African FA were looking for a coach to replace John Musono, they phoned Benny McCarthy's agent, Rob Moore. Rob phoned me, and I put forward the names of Gianluca Vialli, Walter Smith, Stuart Baxter, people I could vouch for and who I thought would do a good job. They went for Baxter partly because he was able to quote as references three people who stood out in football: Arson, Wenger, Sir Bobby Robson and Sven-Göran Eriksson. So those were three friends and contacts of Stuart who spoke up for him, and he became South African manager. Stuart's also the guy responsible for the cracking story about when at Vissel Kobe he and his family decided to stay on after the devastating earthquake there ripped the city apart. The owner of Vissel Kobe was so grateful for this, and boy, that owner features in this interview, and it's fascinating, that he said, yeah, you can sign anybody you want. Stuart said, look out, it'll be Michael Laudrup. Anyway, the long and short is, when Laudrup was about to leave to go to join Stuart in Japan, the King of Spain approached him in a restaurant in Spain's capital. And look, the story gets told in this interview. It's an interview whereby the colour, the intensity, the eccentricities, idiosyncrasies of football just scream out. And we think also that if some of you don't know Stuart's name, we still think this show works best when we speak not only to current stars like Virgil van Dijk and Emiliano Martinez, or bona fide long-term legends like Luca Vialli or Chris Waddle, but it also works best when some of football's great storytellers, they're pioneers, and this is a man who's travelled to work in, as I said, Sweden, South Africa, Portugal, Finland. Stuart belongs in both of these categories. To me, he's also a legend. Look, he's won championships. He's worked with some of the biggest names in the game over a career that spanned 4 decades. Born in Wolverhampton, his accent might sound English to you, Midlands, but he's a Scot, I promise you. So, listen in. You're going to enjoy this. I hope you've brought your passport with you. We're going all around the world. Sometimes in the long and, in my own words, distinguished history of The Big Interview, something that started out as a wee jolly jape, but has become, some might say, Pulitzer Prize worthy. Sometimes there's an interview which is just pure pleasure. And it's this one. We're in the presence of the mighty Stuart Baxter, a man who has influenced football all across the globe, been highly successful, but a man with whom, for one reason or another, my career is inextricably intertwined. Stuart, that's not the kind of fancy language I normally use when we're chatting, so I'll just get down to brass tacks and say, welcome, thank you for joining The Big Interview. For those who are only listening in audio, there are some pretty damn impressive pennants and jerseys around you in your office. Where are you and what am I looking at?
I'm in Sweden, Graham. Nice to be here. Much more nicer to be talking to you. I've got my very first South African shirt behind me there. I've got Cristiano Ronaldo's shirt when we played Portugal and he scored a penalty with Finland and he beat us 1-0. And my first England shirt is down there. I think that's Nicky Butt's shirt that we played against Australia. So that's what's around me in here.
It's pretty damn impressive compared to the bare walls you can see behind me. But Stuart, before I start asking you questions, let's play true false. Mr. Stuart Baxter, at some stage, at least once in your professional career, have you been menaced with a loaded gun?
True.
Stuart Baxter, at some stage in your professional life, has your house, and sadly your family, come very close to being enveloped by an earthquake? True or false?
True.
Stuart, was the experience of being in a dressing room with Jim Mclean scarier than either of those? True or false?
True.
Stuart, are you one of the best travelled British managers in the history of the modern game? True or false?
Some would say most travelled. Some would say journeyman.
No, this is who hurt you, Stuart? You're in a safe space here. Most travelled because highly desired and highly successful. Stuart, let's go to Jim Mclean, because sadly there'll be some people listening to this who've forgotten that he was probably, including Arson, Wenger, the only manager that has ever really gone nose to nose, toes to toe with Sir Alex Ferguson when the two of them were forming the new firm, Dundee United and Aberdeen, and if not utterly succeeded, one, got right under Fergie's skin, two, not backed off 1 inch, three, he took Dundee United to a couple of European finals, one European final and a European Cup semi-final where they were roundly cheated by the then people in charge at AS Roma. Explain your experiences of, I don't think he was christened Wee Jim, but he should have been christened Wee Fiery Jim Mclean.
I was at Preston. We played Dundee United in a pre-season friendly. Andy Gray was playing his last game for Dundee United before he went to Aston Villa. So I was marking Andy Gray. I had a decent game, difficult to play against Andy at that time. Brave as a lion and made his presence felt. So I thought I did quite well. I did that well that Jim loaned me from Preston. The loan became a transfer, a very short one, and my experience of him was at that time quite positive. You know, it was quite. I thought, oh, I like this fella. He's a competitor. He's a winner, but that sort of winning instinct. When we played our first game at Ibrox against Rangers, and he stormed in throwing cups around and ripped the door off its hinges and threatened everybody, including the kit man in the dressing room. That was a little bit of an awakening for me, but and it didn't get any better. It just got worse. So it was. But as soon as we were away from the match, he was an absolute tough on the training field.
Had you seen ferocity like that in football before?
No, never. Maybe I led a sheltered life, Graham, I don't know. I'd seen glimpses of that, you know, but Jim was ferocious. Big lads like Davy and Airy, they cringed when he went off on one.
What interests me is that because you've coached in so many countries, most of which we'll come to, but they would include Portugal and Japan and Finland and South Africa and England. It goes on and on and on. I imagine you've had to change your psychology or be adaptable in your psychology, adaptable in your management skills. Do you think there'll ever be a place for, you know, the most ferocious type of Jim Mclean, Alex Ferguson experience? Alex Ferguson was widely misunderstood because the easy pigeonholing of Furious Fergie lasted longer than Fergie because he changed. But do you think that's gone forever in football?
Let's backtrack first and find out where did that come from. Well, the first coaching came from the military, didn't it? Listen, son, do as I tell you, or people will get killed. And that was wake yourself up, son. And that was where it came from. And then we drifting through now to a sort of guided discovery. I'll ask you open questions and hope that you suddenly discover what I want you to do. You know, the two ends of the scale. You know, I think the modern coach has got to be able to do all of those things, and he's got to know when to do it. Now, if you get it wrong, then you're probably not a very good coach. But at the right time, if you're going to liven people up, if they've come in and they've not put it in, and the players have not given what you think they should be giving, then why is it not in its place to go back to that military style, get back online, lads, and do as I'm telling you, you know? Let's get back to our best. Why is that not in place? Now, I'm not saying that being an instructor sometimes, being an inspirer sometimes, being a father figure sometimes, put your arm around players, I think that is the modern coach. And society has changed since back then, and kids have changed, football players have changed, their priorities are different, and we just need to know which hat to put on. But does it have a place? Probably still.
Do you think, because you've touched on something that I hold dear, and the more I travelled, the more I felt it to be true, that one of the things that made British football so successful before you or I were born, but during our lives, because we're sort of similar in age group, was the fact that when there wasn't mass communication and when there wasn't mass sharing of information, that military style of coaching, particularly when, you know, there were many times when an international coach in Britain wasn't allowed to pick. It was the team was picked by committee. But well into my working career as a journalist, British footballers were largely expected to do as they were told on the pitch. And if you were all together, you were unified and it was an 11-man effort and the coach was clever, it functioned. But as you looked around, particularly as I began to travel, you saw devolved intelligence where players on the pitch could actually take a grasp of a 20-minute period or a 30-minute period, or could rip up the tactics if they weren't working instead of waiting until half-time. And that began to divide the two spheres of football during our working careers.
100% correct. And even though I'd been abroad and I'd worked a lot abroad, the very first time I saw the big difference was when I visited Arsenal. I visited Arson, and he was working. And when I watched him working, I realised that the Arsenal players must be experiencing such a vast difference between... I'm not talking about quality. I'm not talking about Arson counter George Graham, who was the best. I'm saying there must have been such a huge difference in the delivery of information, and that's what you're getting at there. That it could be a well organised, do as I tell you, son. Very left brain, very logical thinking, struggling to be a bit creative, aren't we? Yeah, well, that's not strange, is it? You know, so that one. And then you've got the Arson sort of guiding people and being tough at the right time, talking transition suddenly, you know, instead of sitting back and being a counter-attacking team, we'll get after people, we'll provoke a transition, then we'll explode away. You know, these must have been two vastly different things, but as you quite rightly say, it was a journey that it's probably still going on today. It's probably still not finished yet.
I think we're at the extreme edge of it, and we're going to come back to that, because I know that although you hold views that are different from the voguish ideas at the moment, yours are effective and you're a good thinker in that you don't reject what's happening, you analyse it and you ask people to look closely. But I want to move back a little bit to the first time we talked, and I was an inquisitive young reporter on a desk in Scotland, and I can't remember why I decided to investigate Scots who were abroad. Now, I'm calling you a Scot. You might have been born on the wrong side of the border, but you're ours. I claimed you long, long ago. I remember celebrating the fact that a Scot had won a foreign league, because you won the title in Sweden, and this wasn't your first coaching experience by a long, long way, but you were a title winner in a major European country at a time when, for example, not long different from when Gothenburg were ripping things up and beating Manchester United in the Champions League. And if you asked literally everybody in Britain what was the name of Stuart Baxter's title-winning side in Sweden, I think maybe about 6 people would be able to name them. Do you know what I mean? So tell us about Solna, and then I'm going to ask you specifically about what it was, the incident at Solna, that got me, once I interviewed you, splashed all over BBC Radio 5.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the story really starts in Japan, because I just won the championship in Japan, and Arsene Wenger had come to Nagoya. So Arsene was at Grampus. I then moved from San Frecce, where I won the championship, to Kobe, and we were there one year simultaneously. So Arson then moved to Arsenal, and I, at the end of my stint there, moved to AIK in Stockholm. So Arson did the double at Arsenal, I did the double in Sweden, and we got drawn against each other in the Champions League. So that's where that one ties in. Arson had gone there, I'd gone to Sweden, and I went to a club that was a big club, passionate supporters, and yet had done nothing for 10 years. I had to walk into the club and really own the place because there were big personalities in the dressing room. Very similar to Arsenal. Arson walked in with Tony Adams and Bold and Keown and people like that, big personalities. So I walked in. Johan Mjällby was one of them that the Scots fans would know. So we walked in, and it had to be, this is the way we're going to play. And they were talking about the military. This was very much Stuart Baxter's idea. And guys, I don't want a discussion about this. This is what we're going to do, because this will win us the league. So we started quite poorly. And I'm sure you're going to ask me about that little period a bit later. And then suddenly we went on around 13 games where we didn't concede a goal. And that was in the middle of a Champions League episode as well. So we went in and we ended up winning. We won the championship. Of course, I became quite popular. We stayed another 2 years because it was just like the most electrifying time of my career, probably, because you were playing so close to the edge all the time. I remember we were leading the league my second year. We got booed off the field at half time at 0-0 because we weren't playing well enough. So it was edge of your seat stuff.
Tell people, what is Solna? Let's leave AIK aside again. Describe Solna. Describe life in Solna, not just as a football man, because if people are listening to this on their way into work at Worksop or commuting to Arbroath or Dungannon, and they're like, I wouldn't mind a couple of years in Stockholm. So tell people what Solna is, where it is, what it's like.
Solna's it's basically a little suburb of Stockholm. Stockholm is a magnificently elegant city. Solna is a very ordinary place. Solna is straight up and down. It's just rows of flats, and the National Stadium was in Solna, which is where we played our games. And IAK Solna was, and the people used to go mental if you said IAK Stockholm. It was a very old traditional Swedish club, and so they were very proud people, very passionate. Playing for IAK is like, I don't want to say it's special, but when we played Fiorentina in the Champions League, we had an Australian player. And there was an Australian player playing for Fiorentina. And he came up to him before the game. He says, what's it like playing for these? He says, because all our lads are talking about it. So that's what it was like. The Fiorentina players knew that coming to play in Solna was like going to the Sami Aliena or one of these sort of places in Istanbul. The Black Army is the IAK Solna ultras, if you want to call them that. I don't like calling them that. They don't like being called that. They're the Black Army. They're on one specific, the north side of the stadium, and they were the ones that booed us off at half time. Basically, after each game, the players would go and stand there in front of them and either take their wrath, or they would be doing the wave with them, and people would be jumping out of the crowd, and they would be, we'd be thanking them. I've played a game against Bate Borisov in the Champions League, where we opened the first 5-10 minutes quite slowly, which they didn't like. We were leading 2-0, we beat them away, so I don't know if it was like, how do we approach this game really? They then went on a sort of a chant that was like, basically it was, come on Aiko, come on Aiko, come on Aiko, for 30 minutes, non-stop. They stopped just before half time. I'm not joking, it was the bench, we kept looking at the supporters. It was like, I can't believe this. And the players went from being a bit slow to absolutely flying at people. We were 1-0 up at half time when we ended up beating them 2-0 again. So they could literally lift the team up, and they can now. They're the same now. The generations just keep coming, and it's amazing.
Do you know? I know that psychology and philosophy has entered a lot into your managerial career, and we'll come to why. When you first explained the Black Army to me, I thought that it was such an odd piece of human interaction, because you came to them and delivered them success after a barren time, and you and they were nose to nose, toe to toe a lot of the time. You wouldn't call it total harmony. And how can it be that you bring them success, you're on the edge all the time, and yet it's a bit cat and dog the whole time you're there?
The beginning was the worst. The beginning was the worst. I came from Japan. We had a fantastic pre-season. I think we won a tournament down in Marbella where we beat, I think it was the top Norwegian teams, the FC Copenhagen and Brøndby, and the top Danish teams. And they were really thinking, this is our year, you know. And then we opened like 0-0, 1-1, 0-1, and it, after about 6 games, I remember we played a game at home, drew, and the police came to me after the game and said that, Stuart, there's some of the lads want to speak to you. I said, what? I said, no, I think you better come out and just speak to them. I went out and there was 4 lads, and one was very well dressed, and another one was got a big leather jacket on, and I said, yeah. And the one jumped in my face, and he's going, this is not good enough for us. And then another one just put his arm across his chest and said, hey, calm down. He says, listen, Stuart. And I said, and then I jumped in, didn't I, like Big Mouth. I went, hey, if you want to go down in the dressing room, you'll see other people that are sick. You'll see other people that care. So don't come to me and give... And of course, then this lad went, yeah, okay, Stuart, have a beer with us. They'd fronted me, basically, to test me out. You know, has this guy got any bottle? So they just walked away. The policeman said, as we were walking down the stairs, be careful, Stuart. He says, the one with the leather jacket, he smashed someone's kneecap with a baseball bat because he owed him 200 crowns, which is about 20 quid. Okay. And, the amount of times I said me and my big mouth that evening was incredible. You know, so that was my beginning with them. Then we went on this run, and in the middle of all this, my wife's mother, God bless her, she had cancer. And so I had to take 1 week away from it in the summer, where I went down. I stayed with my wife and her mother when she was passing away, and I went back. And when I went back, there was a massive flat banderole spread across, "We are Baxter's bodyguards." They were incredible. I loved them. I loved them. And from there, and he was like this. Resign, you bastard. If we lost 1-0, it was resign. And it was pretty hectic. I mean, in the bad times, one of them placed a letter bomb in the offices of the club, and the police came, and we had to get out of the. That was the bad. They are not like that now. I have to add, they are not like that. I believe they're the best supporters I've ever seen, but they have you on the edge all the time.
I suppose that whether you consider yourself Scottish or English, one of the things that unites you and I is a certain degree of ferocity and a not just big mouth, but a certain, you stick your chest out and you go head first into life. I suppose those sort of things, they don't make you do more work or better work, but when you are exposed to the outside edges of human passion, it impacts on you, and I think you notice it. It's not just a 9-to-5 job for you. And I believe, listening to you over the years, that sort of thing, you don't want your family to be under. I think you don't want letter bombs, but you've got a capacity to go, I understand what these people are like and what they want, and I'll do it my way, but I don't mind a little bit of storm and drang going on around me. If
you talk about enlightenment, you talk about a journey where you find out about yourself. So if I'm more enlightened now than I was when I started my football journey, it's not surprising, because I've found out about myself. In certain situations, you've got to keep it together. And in certain situations, it's like, you see, you don't do a better job, but you make sure you do a good job. Whereas if you're not as adjusted as I was, then maybe you bottle it, and maybe you do a crap job and you get the sack. Well, I didn't. I didn't. I went on and I won the championship. I could have very easily panicked, not stood up for myself, not stood up for the team. I remember the game we played against Gothenburg when we went on this run. It was away. We had a man sent off, and we had 10 men, and we battled, and then we scored a set play with 5 minutes to go. And I remember what I said to the players before the game, and they all looked at me. It was that look where it's, don't worry about us, mate, And I said to them, I says, now look, I says, you know what's going on? You know the stuff that's been happening. Now we've got two choices. I said, we either bottle it and you change, or it's no compromise, and we win things our way. Now it's no compromise or it's compromise. What are we going to do? No compromise, gaffer. We went out, they ran their legs off, and it was 1-0. And we went on a run then of a run that won the championship. So it was. I remember the day. I can remember the moment as clear as it was yesterday.
A lot of these things, in my opinion, particularly derived from the interviews we've done in this series, are innate. They're born into you, but we all change. I think we can all get softer or harder or wiser. And I want to ask you, if I don't remember wrongly, in one of our long chats, I think that it was probably as a schoolboy where, for one reason or another, I don't know if it was to do with your Scottish roots or whatever, life had been a little bit bumpy with maybe older kids or other kids. And I was speaking recently, I don't know if you know this, to big Robert Huth, who was at Chelsea and Leicester, won a title at Leicester, Germany. And growing up in Berlin, you'd never judge it now because you wouldn't look badly at big Robert. He had a tough time and took to judo. And if I don't remember wrongly, at minimum, there was an element of karate, which it's what separates us. I'm a karaoke man, which means full hand, and you're a karate man, which means open hand, which means we're united by KAR. It changes you because it isn't just either the kata side or the combative side. It's a lot about philosophy and ideology. And that did, as a young man, that made a difference to you, right?
It wasn't the reason that I started doing martial arts. But I think in later years, I look back and I think that may have been an underlying stimulus. When my father was the coach at Aston Villa, and I would be going to school, the older boys would be, the coach of Villa's crap and they're useless, and then it would be turning around and smack, and we'd be kicking off, and I'd always get a walloping because I wasn't, they were 5 and 6 years older than me, but I wasn't having people saying that about my dad, and so that was the sort of a background. And then I started. I met an English guy. Who in Sweden he'd represented England in an Olympic Games when they'd won a gold medal. And he was a sensei, he was a teacher. So I started working with him, and it became more and more and more. And then when I went to Japan, I was really into it, and I was trying to sort of then pick up the more, let's say, philosophical or spiritual side of martial arts. So it developed more into that. It developed more into a way of living, or a way of thinking, or just putting it into your training, your everyday training. So yeah, and it did. It affected my thinking about sports. I mentioned that the word enlightenment. Where did I get that from? It's from martial arts. The way to enlightenment through the empty hand, karate do. That's what it is. And I often say to young kids, you can get that enlightenment through football. Dedicate yourself to football. Find out about yourself in defeat. Find out about yourself in success. Dedicate yourself to being the best you can be. You can get that in almost any sport, but especially football.
When you began as a young man at martial arts, what did it begin to teach you that was beyond the physical? What were the philosophical things that will later come in useful to you when you tried to? Because Wenger, and for listeners, they need to understand that we're talking to a man when you and I were first chatting about the possibility of job applications. You said, "Oh yeah. My references will be Sven Goran and Bobby Robson and Arson Wenger." And okay, that'll do for me.
Yeah.
What did karate teach you philosophically?
Well, when I did kickboxing, it teach me I wasn't very good. But I mean, apart from getting kicked all over the place, no, it teaches you things like dedication. It teaches you to concentrate on the here and now. It teaches you to not get carried away with successes. It teaches you control. That's probably the word I'm looking for, is control. So I don't know how much did that play a part of when you're facing that first 8 games at ICO and it's not going well, and you need to stay focused, stay determined, do a good job, don't just fade away. How much control did I gain there? Maybe, but I think that's definitely one of the aspects of it that's helped me.
When you got to Japan, and it's a terrific, already that for a couple of reasons, I'm going to focus more on Kobe. But as you said, you won a title. Why do you end up in Japan? What was winning that first title like? And how has the Japanese experience shaped you? Because it's possibly for a Western British-born man or woman, I think it's one of the most radical culture changes you can be introduced to.
I tried to get as good a handle on it as I could. And then I was helped because when I went into the club at Sanfrecce in Hiroshima, not one of the big mega rich clubs, so we had to look. We couldn't sign Leonardo and Buchwald and people like that the others could. I was looking in the Czech Republic and I was looking across the water in Korea. So, I picked up players there, but then they weren't big time Charlies. They were team players. So I was careful to make sure that we had the structure was correct and the instructional part was important for them. And we surprised everybody. We won the league. We both have the utmost respect for the Japanese people. I mean, I think, we saw them recovering from the Kobe earthquake. We were there. We were with them, and I saw the unbelievable bravery. I saw the unbelievable determination, and they made us feel like one of them. They really did.
How did you manage as competitors? And in a country whereby probably your time was massively devoted to coping with a new culture, how did you manage to make decent friends with Arsene Wenger?
I met Arsene at a coaching course in Copenhagen. It would be about 28 years ago. I'm still talking to a friend of mine, a physical coach called Roger Spry, and we're talking about Jens Bangsbo. Jens Bangsbo was a Dane who was working for Juventus, and he was putting on this demonstration of plyometrics, and we were standing, and Roger, who was a fitness coach, he was saying to me, this is interesting, and then suddenly a head came in between us and said, yes, I think this is very interesting, and it was Arsene. And then, of course, he started talking, and he said, I'm Arsene Wenger, and this, and we were on talking for about 30 minutes, and he finished up by inviting me to go to Monaco with a couple of my younger players from Halmstad, and that he would do the same. He would bring a couple of his kids across, and we started like that. So I went to Monaco, wind forward. My next job after Halmstad was in Japan. And Arsene then resigned. He resigned from Monaco, and then he was 6 months out of work. And then Nagoya said to me, we have a friend. We were playing them. We have a friend of yours in the stadium. Oh, really? I says, yeah. He says, yes, he would like to see you after the game. So after the game, I think we lost 1-0. And I'm wandering through all these little corridors, and then I open the door. Wenger's sitting there, isn't he? And he says, hello, Stuart. And I went, oh, thanks for letting me know you're coming, sort of thing, So I met him after the game, and then after that, he was there for the time he was. He went to Arsenal, and I went to AIK. But we got on really well, and I didn't speak French, but I spoke the same language, I think.
Because he's talked at length about the fact that In his own words, I'm not being mean to him, he says he's a terrible loser, a desperate loser. And he explained that the Japanese culture taught him to try and cope with defeat in a different way.
He loves Japan. Arson loves Japan. When people were asking me, will Arson leave Arsenal? I would answer them, if Arson leaves Arsenal, I think he will go to Japan. You know, and sometimes our conversations would be like, will your next job be Bayern Munich, or, you know, and he would ask me, you know, would you go back to Japan? And I got the feeling that Arson was capable of saying, top flight football, forget about it. I'll go back to Japan, I'll take a small team, I'll even take young kids, I'll open an academy, you know, and take kids that had no parents from the Fukushima or from the Kobe earthquake. And I had the feeling that Arson could very, very much do that, because I think he was so impressed with Japan and valued his time there so much.
You talked then about Kobe a couple of times, and again, it was after that you and I first spoke, but subsequently when we went back over it, you explained to me just the most extraordinary things. I think you'd been away scouting, maybe even signing a footballer in Portugal with maybe the club secretary, and I hadn't known that the Kobe natural disaster had actually started offshore. So I'm sorry to ask for a retelling of a traumatic event, but it is, in human terms, when you travel the world, when you experiment, things can happen that are absolutely extraordinary. What then am I hinting at? The fact that you get woken up in Portugal by a banging on the door to be told what's happening, right? And back home, your wife and kids are seeing the disaster coming towards them.
The epicentre was a couple of kilometres from where we lived, but the epicentre ran in let's say a westerly direction, so passed in front of us instead of going towards us in a northerly direction, and therefore we were relatively, and we were on a bit of a mountain, so as it dissipated, as it reached us, but still walls falling down and stuff like that, and still massively traumatic. But I got woken up and I looked at CNN and it was in Portuguese. So all I could see was the earthquake and I could see Japanese writing. And I said, oh yeah, is it Tokyo? They said, no, it's Kobe. And I've got the president, not the president, I think it was the CEO, in the next room with his family in Kobe and my family in Kobe, and we had to try and get back. And of course, that was chaos, trying to get back in. So when we got back in, it was the aftershocks, and it was the city in ruins, and it was very, 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 very difficult. I mean, they said to me, you can go, take your family and go. We'll give you 1 year's money. This is not your fight. And I stayed, obviously, because I'd taken it on. They were going to pay all of the foreigners that I'd taken 4 of a staff, and I'd signed players, and they were going to give everybody 1 year's money and thank you, and it's not your fight. And then a new president came in who had, God bless him, Takasago-san, and he said to me, Baxter-san, give us a team that will show this city that you can't be beaten. He said, if you can do that, I'll back you. So like football just went out the window, and it was now this was something much, much bigger. And in the first, our training pitch had a split down the side. It was like a wave had passed through it. The showers were all down. So we got demoted into the second league and had to win that league to prove that we could host the J League. Well, the first 12 games, it was disastrous. It was disastrous. We couldn't train. Everybody was depressed. It was like the aftershocks were going off all the time. I think we won 2 games in 12. And then at the turnaround, Takasago-san came and said, I'm moving you to a training field that I've built for you. And we had a home suddenly. And the players and I think we won 13 on the spin. It was unbelievable. It was like you just plugged them in. It was like, whap! And at the end of the season, we missed promotion by, I think, a point. And the following year, we got promotion. And he said to me, and he didn't speak very good English, and he was drinking, and he looked a little bit tipsy. And then he looked at my wife, and he said, "I will look after your family as long as I've got blood in my body." And he went, and you can buy any player you want. Ha ha ha. I said, don't say that. I said, I might sign Michael Laudrup from Real Madrid. And in the morning, his secretary came to the house with a letter for me saying, "I've booked our flights to Madrid, you speak to Michael." And we went to Madrid and we signed Michael Laudrup. So that was his gift to the city.
Our sponsors are Bet365, and they said, what do you see as your greatest achievement as a manager? Now, you're going to answer that, you're going to tell us, but, if we're listening to winning the title with Hiroshima in those situations, winning the title with AEK Solna in the way that you did, and there are a host of other competing stories, but I've always felt since we first met that taking sporting triumph out of human disaster and blending in a gift to that society was my opinion of your greatest achievement from a distance. But if our sponsors want to know what you consider as your greatest achievement, what would you say it is?
Right, you're right, Graham. I mean, I've got on my office wall, I've got a letter from the mayor of Kobe thanking me for helping him to rebuild the city. As exactly as you say, I think that is the greatest achievement, because that drained me of every ounce that I had. When it was done, I'm not joking, I walked from the bench onto the field where the players threw me up in the air. When I came down, I was like a rag doll. I literally was. It was like, we've done it and it's over. And I can now go home and sleep. That's exactly how it felt. And so I agree with you. For me, as you say, nothing really can get near what we had to go through. I mean, again, it's that enlightenment, isn't it? You learn about yourself in those situations.
And when you get Michael Laudrup, it's a mixed experience. But I remember he was ultra shocked that I knew about his dinner in a restaurant with the king. But if you take up the tale, how do you begin to persuade one of Europe's greatest ever players, not greatest modern players, genuinely one of the greatest players Europe's ever produced, who's enjoyed the great life at Barcelona and has been part of the dream team and has won the European Cup in 92 at Wembley, and then gone to Madrid and retained a good feeling at Barcelona, which is literally next to impossible. How do you begin to persuade him to come to disaster-torn Kobe?
I knew of Michael as a person through other people in Denmark, because obviously I worked in Sweden and Denmark. He's a neighbour, and so Michael's qualities as a person were talked about. That he's not a big-time Charlie. He's a very serious family man, and so his father Finn was selling Select the balls. He was the top man there, and so I'd got people that had spoken to him, and I'd heard that Michael had become a little bit disenchanted with the life of an absolute superstar. Couldn't go shopping with his missus, for example, simple things. So I went down that road. I said, look, if you want a place where people respect your privacy, it's Japan. If you want to come to a place where you can affect a whole country, it's Japan. If you want a project where you will be the leader, then it's Japan. And I would love to work with you. As it grew, his wife Siv was as instrumental as Michael as I was in persuading Michael, because I think they saw that this could be a fantastic time for us to. And what happened was that Michael came, and the game was so quick that the players were moving so quick that Michael said, in the beginning, I just thought, no, I can't play here because they do things off the top of their heads. But he realised that it was sharpening him. He was suddenly as sharp as he'd ever been. And in fact, he got back in the national team after coming to us, and then came to me and said, Stuart, look, I'm in such good nick. I've realised I want a little bit more. I want a bit more. And Morten Olsen at Ajax has said he's interested in me to go back. And he went back to Ajax. I think he won 2 championships. So, you know, Japan wasn't for Michael in inverted commas. It wasn't a sort of a little bit of a sidestep. It was an important part in his career. Not as big name as Juventus or as Lazio and Barcelona. No, of course not. But nonetheless, it was. I think if you ask Michael, I don't know because I've never asked him a straight question, but I would think that he would say that it was a very important, very meaningful part.
It's funny how the ripples continue, Stuart, because Andres Iniesta grew up idolising Michael Laudrup. I mean, literally idolising. We'll still talk about him at the drop of a hat. And where is he now? The ripples in the pond. Yeah, he's got a good contract there. And yeah, Piqué and Mkhitaryan have said to him, go there. But he's taken his young girls, his wife. He's gone over to the city that you know so well. And undoubtedly, a massive influence for Andres Iniesta playing a Vissel Kobe right now is the fact that you once took Michael Laudrup there. It's nuts.
Fantastic. No, I mean, if there's a country in the world that there are those ripples, it's Japan. One of the greatest samurai was Musashi Miyamoto, and he has the Book of Five Rings, and that is all about what we're talking about now. It's how you affect what you say will echo out in the universe, you know, and they believe in that, you know, that what the deeds that you do, you're remembered for them through time.
When I take that call from Rob Moore, which I think was after Deportivo La Coruña losing to Liverpool at home in the Champions League, and he's like, I'm not sure who to suggest. Who would you suggest? I suggest, and I put your name on the list, and you win the job by merit, by CV, by recommendations, by impressing them. But by putting your name in a frame, did I do you a good turn or a bad turn from there to now? And what's it? But you haven't exclusively been in South Africa from 2005 to now, but you've spent, you know, if I'm not wrong, your mum's a geography teacher, and you've shown a repeated thirst to see the world and experiment and cultures. But South Africa, in a number of years, has been right up there as one of maybe the number one. So, rings and ripples. If
you'd asked me that question, Graham, after my first stint with Bafana, I wouldn't have been sure if I'd have said you did me a favour, because it was so difficult. It was always, I had the feeling that this guy wasn't wanted there all the time, not just if we're lost. I thought I was in a good space to do it, but I wasn't. And so I felt when I left, I'd got unfinished business. So when I came back to a club, Kaiser Chiefs, and I won everything for 3 years. I won everything. I think we won 2 trophies one year, 3 trophies the next year, 1 trophy the played everywhere, smashed everybody. Won the league by 12 points the one year and smashed everybody. And then people accepted me. So then when I left, I came back and I took a smaller club because I thought, no, I'm going to show them I can do it with any club. So I won 2 trophies there. And then, of course, the national team said, no, you've got to come back. Because all the stuff that you wanted to do, you can get to do now. And that's when I rebuilt a team that would then qualify for the first time. They hadn't qualified for anything for 12 years. So we qualified, went to AFCON, and did nicely at AFCON with a new team. And then I thought, that's me. Now, that's it. I'm not going to. They want me to keep going to Qatar, but I thought, no, I'm not going to be able to. And I don't want to start a new journey and then after 2 years go, guys, you know what? I'm out, because that would be doing them a disservice. So I thought it's nice. Let's shake hands. And they gave me a very nice send-off, Safa, which was nice. And I feel like I've got a lot of friends there now, which if I hadn't gone back, I don't think I would have got.
It's good to hear about such enrichment during a life well spent, because not everybody gets to do the thing they're passionate about, and not everybody gets to has the tools to succeed and enrich themselves at the same time. We've got people called socios who are the members who've been behind this podcast for the longest time. One of them is the guy you caught us. It's Derek Johnson, but spelt differently. Derek's asked an interesting question, really. He just simply says, he's a blue nose, so we Tommy Mclean and the other DJ would be proud of him. Derek says, what would be Stuart's 3 non-negotiables with any squad he inherits in his role as coach, manager? 3 non-negotiables.
Well, the first one would be tactically, and that would be which, if we're talking about a building, which supporting walls in the house, you don't touch them. That's me making that decision. That's not you. That's me. Now, I would try and sell it to the squad, and I would get their buy-in, but once we've agreed, you don't tactically, you don't change those principles. If you want to paint the wall blue there, or you want to put a door there or a window, that's up to you. Express yourself. But so tactically, that would be the first thing. Mentally, I don't accept anybody thinking he's better than everybody else, because I think you go down a very slippery slope if you even start that one. We accept it from him. He got picked up by the police. He was out drinking. Well, he's going to be winning the game at the weekend, so I'll look the other way. I don't do that. I don't do that. I'm sorry, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't do that. And the last one would be in terms of the team and the values. So the values of the team, the club, the culture. I'm a stickler there. I'm a stickler that once we've agreed on the culture, it's going to be like this. You don't get an easy way out or a day off. No, you don't. That is every time we go on the training field. It's every time we go on the field. It's when you're walking down the street. It's when you're talking to the media. The culture of the club. You make sure that you're not going to shit on your teammates.
It's a good answer. A lot of people who've heard of you but not seen your coach will be one step ahead now. We said that this would be about an hour and a bit, and okay, so we're coming to the last tiny section. I need to take you to Langan's Brasserie in London, where I've had what I would admit was an extremely boozy and expensive lunch with George Graham and Ian McGarry and Terry Venables. A lot of alcohol's been had. 2 of us, neither of which is George or Terry, are heading to the Albert Hall to see the Teenage Cancer Trust gig with Noel Gallagher. We arrive at the Albert Hall. One of us, Ian McGarry, suggests that pints of white wine might be in order. And we're just beginning our first pint of white wine each, and my phone goes, and it's you. As football managers are bound to do, you're carefully trying to garner a little bit more context for a phone call you've had from Carlos Queiroz. That not for the first time Sir Alex Ferguson has decided that he's leaving, and that Carlos Queiroz is going to take over. And I know, I'll never ever reveal who told me this, but I know that Carlos Queiroz was going to make you his Manchester United assistant coach. How did these events begin for you? Because it certainly won't have been over pints of white wine or lunch at lunch at Langan's.
I was quite close to Carlos, because Carlos was obviously the South African manager, and then he left, and I met him, and we spoke, and then we got on very well, and then I visited Sir Alex and Jim Lawler at Man United.
Chief Scout.
Yeah, and Carlos was there, so we had more and more times where we bumped into each other. We talked about the game. He watched my team play. Like, he was also in Japan. Carlos was in Japan. He took over Arson's Grand Passate. So we had many opportunities to talk the game. He watched my teams play. We had conversations. Yeah. So it just I have a huge respect for Carlos, and I would like to think he has a modicum of respect for me as well. And obviously when he was talking about, I think if I'm not speaking out of school, I think there had been conversations quite high up that says, in the event of Sir Alex leaving, you will be first in line, Carlos. And I think that he thought that may happen. I think either he had a conversation with Sir Alex or whatever. But he was disappointed in the finish, and so was I, by the way. But yeah, he'd intimated that to me.
But no, this is something I know separately because I'm very close friends with Martin Ferguson. Martin's daughter was getting married in the summer after the 2009 Champions League final, and Uncle Alec phoned and said, I won't be at the wedding. I'm staying on. The pre-season will be then. But you were leaving, and what's that? No, after losing that 2009 final was, as it often is to great men, it was a spur to him saying, I'm not stopping now. I am going on. This is not my sign-off, which anybody who's watched him, known him or appreciated him would understand fully. And I just think because about a year later, you and I spoke at length about the potential for you having a role at Celtic, which was definitely on the table, very clearly on the table. And amalgamating that, even though you coached at the FA, I wondered if, particularly in the way that you phrased that about unfinished business with South Africa, I wonder whether it's a slight stone in your shoe that all these achievements that you've been able to have, via which your personality and your skills have triumphed. I want to use the phrase against the odds, because if you put yourself in a foreign culture, automatically you're pushing the boulder uphill. Now, you've kept getting the boulder to the top of the hill, but it's going to be easier in your own culture and your own language. That's just a fact. To what degree then is there a stone in your shoe that you haven't been able to apply these learnings, your skills, your personality in your own islands?
Let me say this. It has been a bigger stone in my shoe. It has been. It still is, but in a way I've lived with it. The jobs that I've been offered or been able to get, I've not really wanted, because the jobs that I was in were in my opinion as good. They gave me other things about the culture, the sporting. Yeah, the jobs that I really wanted, for some reason, the timing was wrong. One, I was talking to Wolves, and they came to South Africa. We were in the middle of a World Cup campaign, and they offered me the job, and I couldn't take it. And then that would have been a massive emotional ride for me, because my father played for the Wolves, so. That would have been big, and I couldn't take it. And then Celtic was the same. I mean, I've been involved with Celtic a couple of times. The last one was when Neil went in, and I was going to go in as in a sort of a supporting role, and the one before was going to be as coach. But the one before, it just didn't work out. And then the one with Neil, it didn't work out because it was released in the wrong sort of way, and the Finnish Football Association took the ump, and the journalist there said I was going behind people's backs, and so the ones that I've wanted, for some reason, it's not followed through, and the ones that I've been offered, it's never felt right. So, and then add to that the ones that you maybe think you've got a chance at. Probably I'm not the sexy foreign name that people want. I've worked abroad, but I'm not a Gianluca Vialli type of, that could be interesting. The punters get excited. And I'm not either the one that's played 150 games in the Premier League, so the punters don't get excited about that. So I fall between two stools all the time. So unless someone knows me, like the Wolves did, and like Celtic did, then or like Arson would recommend me to a close friend, if they don't know me, or Carlos knew me, unless they don't know me, then I haven't got that hook to get in, and I've just got used to that.
You've got an open, inquiring mind, but I don't think you're head over heels in love with some of the modern vogues, and you know that I have slightly different views. But the way in which teams defend now, and I don't mean back fours only, how they defend the concept of space, how you play the ball, where you play the ball, I think you'd have ideas in common with Rafa Benitez about where the lines are squeezed, distance between players, attention to detail in terms of defending, where you do and don't try to be creative or thoughtful or right brain, left brain. You wouldn't currently be in the vanguard of fashion, your ideas wouldn't. But you also know that the pendulum always swings. So, is this fair?
No, I think it's fair. I think it's fair comment, very fair. I mean, I'm of the opinion that where we are at the moment is we're sort of worshipping possession and the effects of having possession, of inviting opponents onto us by building from deep, and how do we defend from that sort of position. And I think the emphasis is so much on building from the back that some of our attention to our defending is passed by a little bit. Now, I just think that we've in any sort of harmonious strategy, you've got to be as detailed in your defending as you are in your attacking play. And I don't say that you have to be back heavy by just defending and then you've got no attacking play. Your strategies have got to be clear and understandable for the players, suit the supporters that are watching you, go with the heritage of the club, and also suit the coach's personality. So, because otherwise you're not going to make that vision live for the players. Now, I would prefer, instead of playing counter-attacking, and this is a bit of a when I came back to the FA, this was sort of like, well, what do you mean? Well, rather than counter-attacking, because counter-attacking is like Japanese martial arts, it starts with a block. It starts with self-defence. Well, I would rather have gegenpressing a la Jurgen Klopp, where you are provoking a transition. You know, that for me is a completely different spiritual, emotional way of thinking, that we're sitting waiting for you and then we will attack, rather than we're going hunting for you, so just wait until we're going to shuffle you into that area there, then it's smack, and you're all already thinking attacking before you've even won the ball. So I would prefer that type of defending, but not ruling out in certain games that you are going to sit there and invite them to come onto you and get your distances right and make sure that you do pay attention. But I would just as much say, well, what about if someone does that to us? Well, I want to know my strategy for attacking them and pick my way through has to be just as detailed, has to be as done with as much vigour and passion. So I think you've got to have that holistic approach, and if you don't, then you're only doing half the job.
You've given us a brilliant afternoon, a brilliant interview. You've had an extraordinary career so far, and in my view, you're still young and fit and urgent. There's probably one more big one coming. May it be in Goa? Fair enough, may be in Goa. But we're going to ask you to pick your best five-a-side team. And because we've done in Blue Peter terms, here's one I prepared earlier. I'm just going to remind you that there's a South African, a Dane, a Serb, a Korean, and the inevitable. I'm just going to say the inevitable in at number 5. So if I say to you, who's your first pick? Who's the South African who's in your dream 5?
The one that has I thought he had the biggest possibility to be a real superstar was Spiwi Tshabalala. Spiwi Tshabalala scored the winning goal for South Africa against Mexico in their first World Cup match on home soil. And Shaba played for me. I mean, yeah, Shaba played for me, and I got a text from him last week. And he was talking about, he was saying some very, very nice things. So this is not payback time for him, by the way. But I always told Shaba that he should play in the States. You know, I mean, he could play in Spain, or he could have played at his pomp in the Premier League, but the States would have loved him. He was little, he was tricky, he had a bit of a bubbly personality. They would have loved him. He'd have been a superstar. Just for his skill on the ball and his left foot, he'd have been good anywhere. But Shabba was an outstanding player that should have played outside of South Africa, but by the time he left, it was too late for him.
Shabba's number one, and I guess the guy who's number two, women all over the world thought of as Mr. Loverman. He's about 6'2", full head of hair, and he probably will have when he's 100. As Mrs. Merton said, what first attracted you to the magnificent Dane, Michael Laudrup?
I mean, Michael's one of the few players, and I say this, one of the few players that when I've been training, I've been learning. Because you would say, like, this is what we're going to do, and Michael would do something, and he'd go, can we do that as well, Gaffer? Yeah, you can. Yeah, we can, apparently. So it would be like that. So not all the time, but sometimes you just see him do something in training, you'd go, oh, you'd step back. I mean, the one I remember him in the World Cup against Nigeria, where he's looking that way and he just lifted the ball. He did that for us in a league game, and he nearly brought the house down. It was incredible. But Michael was one of those few people, and I always ask this question. About some of the great players, like the Jari Litmanens, the Sami Hippias, the people that are great players. I always ask them, who was the most important person in your career? And not many of them say a coach. And Michael was that. I said to him, Michael, you know what? You're playing in Japan now. You're still just a Danish amateur player that just wants to play football. And he was. And he was that when he was at Real Madrid as well. He was just someone that loved playing football. And when he went out there, he was like a big kid. He played and expressed himself. I said to him, Michael Jordan said once, you see my picture in the newspaper, you see my soul on the field. That was Michael.
When you were playing against Pep Guardiola and Arson Wenger and whoever was, I don't know if Trapattoni was the Fiorentina manager, I think he might have been, in that extraordinary Champions League group, you had a bit of you had a bit of Novakovic for the soul. Tell us about your beautiful Serbian.
Nebojša Novakovic. He was, when I came to AIK, he was 34. They wanted to get rid of him, and after the first training, he said to me, he says, "Coach, don't get rid of me. You're the first real coach I've had." I said, "Stop smoking, do some stretches, and listen to me, and I'll see how we go." He was magnificent. He was brilliant. And the night before we played Barcelona had a goalkeeper called Hesp, who was about 2.5 metres tall. He was huge. But I'd watched them, and he lost his goal sometimes when people were in shooting positions. He would advance, thinking, "I'm so big, you can't chip me." And I said to Nebojša the night before, that it wasn't something that I told him 3 weeks before. As we were walking off the training field the night before, I just said, "Hey, by the way, if you're in a shooting position and you see Hesp losing his goals, go for a chip." He said, "I'm going to score." He said, "I'll chip him." He said, "I will do." And I'm not joking. We played a little 1-2 on the edge of the box. Nebo was running across the penalty area and reversed it, a dink, and it hit the underside of the crossbar and went in. And he ran across to the bench and he said, "I told you, Gaffer." We're playing Barcelona and he's making a joke. He was an absolute, and both Arsen and Bora, Arsen's assistant, both said to me, and they always said to me, that Novakovic was a top class player. He should have played somewhere else. And he used to say to me, when I had a go at him, he'd say, "I don't smoke. I give up smoking and I do stretching, and you're still complaining." So, you thought that was the be all and end all, but no, he was a great player.
Poor old Hesp, Rudy did fail. In fourth place in the top five, a South Korean that I don't know.
No, Junyun. He was, when I was at San Frecce, and I told you we had to look for cheaper options. Our president was a friend of the president of the Korean Football Association, Pak Sam. So he sent me to Korea to watch a game. 2 players that were recommended by this Mr. Pak. So I came over, went to Seoul. I'm stood on a pitch that's got no stands or anything. It's just like a grass bank around the pitch. So I'm stood on this grass bank, watching this miserable game, and the two players that he's recommended are hopeless. And so behind me on an all-weather pitch, there's another game going on. And I've just checked over my shoulder, and it's a fierce tempo. And because the all-weather pitch is a bad surface, they are going through each other. Well, that attracted the Scotsman in me. So I've got my back towards the game here, and I'm watching. And there's one player playing that is like lightning. Only he could handle the ball running. And I've gone, Paksam, what's this game? He said, it's the Korean university team is playing against the Thailand university team. I said, is it the full? Oh, he says, no, they're in the 20s. I said, the number 11 there, how old is he? Oh, he's 18. I said, can we get him across to Hiroshima? He said, yes, why? I said, I'd like him to come across. He came across and he spent 7 days with us. He was absolutely superb for the first 5 days. And every afternoon he would say to me, can I train with the reserves? Well, I want you to be fresh for tomorrow. No, I'll be fresh, don't worry. And he trained with the reserves. At the end of the week, I went down to watch the reserves training. The rest of them were hopeless. The rest of them were just... We played a very tight 4v4, which they couldn't deal with, really. I wasn't taking the session, so I was watching. The only one that could deal with it was No. So I've walked in and I've gone, guys, this is not good enough. No, the Korean lad, he took it like as, you're not good enough. He started going through people, he was shooting, he was overhead kicks, he was like it was the World Cup final. So I thought, hang on a second, this is a player. This is not only a good player, but this is a character. So I signed him on the spot, and I don't know how many, 3 years later or something, he was playing for Korea in the United States World Cup, and he was magnificent. He was one of the best players I've ever worked with. He was one of these explosive players that could run forever. I don't know. Physiologically, that doesn't make sense really, but he could go and go and go and go, and I mean the amount of full speed sprints he would do in a game was incredible. I loved him, and he was a great kid.
You confused me with the last guy we'll speak about because he comprises the fifth in your team, because I thought I knew this fella. I'd seen him playing, I'd met him, I'd interviewed him, but to you he was just Henke. Now, I know that now he's Henke to people that know him, but he was King of Kings, or he was Henrik, or he was Larsson, but to you, he was Henke.
Henke was, everybody in Sweden calls him Henrik Larsson. He would always be in a team, because I think he was just an unbelievable competitor and a very talented footballer. So, if you're going to have those other players in the team, I'd want one that was not going to accept defeat. It was to the point where I'd worked with Henke for about, I think it was my first season. We'd won the cup. We won the cup with Helsinki. I came in mid-season. They were struggling a little bit. Henke had just come from Barcelona. We started improving. We improved. We finished fourth in the league. Just missed Europe, but we won the cup, the Swedish Cup, so we qualified. And at the end of the year, they had this, I think it was called the Royal League, where all the Scandinavian top teams played off in a sort of a tournament. And we'd been drawn against, I think it was Vålerenga in Norway. So after the season in November, going up to Norway and playing in the snow, I don't think Henke was looking forward to that. So I got a call from my mate, Jim Lawler in Man United. He says the gaffer's having a... He says he's having one. He says, I can't find a striker for him. He says, Wayne's the only striker we've got fit. He says, Louis Saha's down, and I can't remember who the other one was down. Maybe it's the Italian Macado. Maybe it was him. And he says, they're all down. He says, we need a striker. I said, I could have one for you. He says, who? I said, Larsson. He said, what? I said, Larsson. He says, is he fit enough? I said, he's fit as a butcher's dog. I said, I've just been with him on the car park. I said, he says, the gaffer loves him. I says, I said, do you want me to ask him? He said, ask him. And while you're asking him, I'll ask the gaffer. So I goes out and I says, Henky, do you want to go and play against Vålerenga in the Champions League, or do you want to go on loan to Manchester United? And he went, what? I said, serious? He said, you serious? I says, yeah, I think so. He went, can I ask my missus? Because Magdalena, she makes most of the big decisions, and that's with all due respect to Henky, because he's a great family man. But Magdalena is very, 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 very smart. She wouldn't let Henky make a bad move. He says, I'll come early tomorrow, and I'll let you know. Well, I knew it was going to be yes. So I go away, and Jim puts Sir Alex on. He said, Stuart, he says, are you serious? I said, yeah. I said, he will do it for you. I said, and I'll tell you what, he will grow, and your lads will love playing with him. I said, this'll turn him on. This'll be wiring him up. I said, don't worry. I said, and he can play. I said, and he can still. I said, I've had him as playing as a bit of a 10. I said, and he still scored 17 goals. I says, but I've seen him linking that way. I've never seen him before. I said, he's not just getting on the end of crosses and finishing. He went, we'll do it. You know? So Henky come the day after, he said, Magdalena said it's a good idea. So they came across. They came across to the Grand Hotel in Helsingborg one night. They went down. Magdalena and Henky went in. It was all done. And then I was in Dubai at the end of the season. And I'd just taken the family to see Cirque du Soleil. And I'm in a taxi going back to the hotel. And United were playing. It was Henky's first game. I think it was Aston Villa. So I'm listening, and in Arabic, on the taxi's radio, I said, excuse me. I said, is that the Villa and United game? Yes. I said, what's the score? 1-0 United. I turned to my missus, I said, Larsson. I said, who scored the goal? He said, Mr. Larsson. I said, thank you. It was great for me, because I thought, well, Sir Alex is going to be absolutely delighted. And he was. And he was, obviously. Said Henky did really well, and he was everything that I thought he would do. And he loved it. He loved it.
Stuart, he's back over here now on the bench with Ronald Koeman, and he's helping tutor Griezmann, who needs it, Ansu Fati, who needs it less, but is going to benefit as a 17-year-old kid being taught by the King of Kings. Listen, you know and I know that this could go on for an eternity, because you've lived a rich, full life, but you're now nudging into Peter Beardsley territory, who did about half hour longer than you've done. My recording stick is about to give up, and I'm going to close by saying to you, Stuart Baxter, good friend of mine, if I was to speak in karate terms, martial art terms, about your life and how it's been spent, is it half ippon or full ippon?
You know, when you're talking martial arts, when you're talking samurai, you've always got to be humble. So, in Japan, when they tell you speak good Japanese, you say, Mada mada desu. I've got a long way to go. So, my answer to that, Graham, would be Mada mada desu. I've got a long way to go.
Then when the journey is complete, we'll speak again. From one not very humble Scot to another humble-ish, half Japanese, half Swedish, half English. You can see why I never did maths, but geography's good for me. Stuart Baxter, in 105 big interviews, you're in there at the top with a bullet. As good as I expected it to be, as enriching as I expected it to be. It's a joy to speak to you about football in your life. Thank you very much, man.
My pleasure, Graham. Thank you.